to switch chairs, or?
Yeah, would you switch chairs?
Yeah.
That chair bothers me. Da-da-da-da.
As Alan London would say now, if you would change...
We did a quick chair switch here. Hi. Good evening, everybody. It's Joe
Was that live?
It was.
It was live?
They showed the chair switch,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Because my back bothers me. This chair's a lot better. But we got that out of the way. These guys, everybody's on about the winter storm tonight. So quick hello, Joe Chaffee here, Joe Rayo there.
Yep.
And we're going to get right to it here.
Joe, before we get into this, I just looked at the 18Z GFS, and I'm just shaking my head.
Yeah.
New York City is like a 554 thickness.
I know. Hey, if it winds up that this thing goes by, the actual the surface low is going to wind up tracking inland of the coast. That warm front's going to shoot up and probably see temperatures at least run up through the 40s briefly late Saturday night, early Sunday morning, right along the immediate coast.
I saw that on the GFSX, the extended forecast for Sunday, with 43 degrees for the high for White Plains.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, really?
Yeah, and
really?
Well, it's not impossible. The snow lovers have the hope that the NAM is going to win this game. So
that's right.
All right, so let's get going, folks, Joe, because we got a ton of stuff here. And by the way, let me just say right off the bat from the beginning, I will do for my Patreon members, the folks that are on my subscription weather site. I'm going to do a private live stream for Patreon members tonight at 10:30. Okay, so after the NAM is done and as the GFS is starting, I'll be jumping on for the Patreon members. Okay, so that is really an extensive area of winter storm warnings. I can't remember the last time we had a winter storm where you had winter storm warnings in this geographic position, covering cities in the
South Dakota.
Yeah, all the way up to from South Dakota. You've got Chicago in a winter storm warning. You have Cleveland in a winter storm warning. Pittsburgh, all of New York State except our part where we're still under a winter storm watch. And Boston, it runs west to east. I mean, we've seen it run southwest to northeast, south to north. Sometimes you get some of that Midwest or the Ohio Valley. But boy, this is just taking a lot of geography here.
A lot of real estate indeed. And in fact, it looks like at least half the country is underneath some kind of an advisory or watch tonight.
Right,
it's crazy.
You've got wind issues on the southern end of this, across Texas, Oklahoma, through Arkansas, western Tennessee, northern Mississippi with wind advisories. You've got wind advisories and some high wind warnings up for parts of New Mexico. The bright blue avalanche possibilities in Colorado and in Utah.
We don't have too many of those here, do we?
No, and they just got through the blizzard warnings and the winter storm warnings up in the mountains of northeastern California, and they're back under some winter storm watches as the next weather system comes in. Just by the way, here's the snow layout in terms of the snowfall accumulation from the Weather Service. The numbers are, I'm going to bring it up the map here, folks. Just give me 1 second. There you go. So we'll get this minimized, get this maximized, and we're going to stay on the window. I am monitoring the chat, by the way, so if you guys have questions or comments, just go ahead and I'm going to be monitoring the chat through this whole live stream tonight. Okay, so we've got the snow amounts. They're not really all that heavy when you in the Midwest and in the Ohio Valley as compared to the ones in the Northeast.
Yeah, the Northeast. I mean, there's some places up in central and northern New England that could pick up 1.5 feet of snow out of this. And the only reason why they're not greater than that is that this storm, Joe, just rockets past us and through the Northeast and out to sea from late Saturday night and on into Sunday. And I'm thinking that for the immediate New York City metropolitan area, we're going to use the increasingly popular non-meteorological term, a thump. And I think we're going to see a thump here between 10 o'clock tomorrow night and 4 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. During that time frame, 6-hour time frame, places that have snow and can hold on to all snow are likely to see snow coming down at the rate of at least 2 inches per hour. And for part of our tri-state area, especially north of Interstate 84, that certainly is a distinct possibility with this, unless, and I just saw on the 18Z GFS model, unless that surge of milder air pushes up more in a prolific fashion than what we've been thinking up till now, and changes that precipitation over from snow to sleet to ice, and maybe even plain rain. I think plain rain now is a possibility, at least south of Interstate 287 in the lower Hudson Valley.
I agree. I agree. Also for for Long Island, New York City,
Island, and New York,
and down through Central and South Jersey, absolutely. Young Cash Register, also known as Little Broomstick, wants to know if there's still a chance for a foot of snow in New York City. I don't know that a foot of snow was ever really on the table with regards to New York City. Once it became pretty evident that the mid levels of the atmosphere were going to go above freezing. No, I mean, you'd have to have these the models. Even the NAM would have to be seriously wrong for that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't get for a place that New York City is projected to have, and this is one of the parameters that we have been using for all these many years to determine snow versus rain. You don't want any numbers much higher than 540 decameters, and the New York numbers indicate like something like 550 or even 552 thickness, and you just simply don't see snow. Maybe some ice and sleet, but you don't see snow to any sizable degree with those kind of numbers. So you gotta keep hoping if you're gonna get that.
Robin Beschloss asking about the entire state of New Jersey being swept with snow from west to east. No, it's South Jersey is going to get, except at the start. South Jersey, you see on the map, we'll get a little tighter here on the northeast. South Jersey Weather Service predictions for all under an inch. So basically, it's a little snow at the start south of 195, and that's it. The numbers in northwestern New Jersey a little more problematic. That's where you could start to see some 7, 8 inch amounts, perhaps a bit more if we get a good solid thumping. I think the 1 foot plus snows to me, Joe, are going to line up just north and west of Scranton, and then kind of cutting a line through central PA. Williamsport's in there, and a few other towns. It's not Harrisburg. The Weather Service has got numbers in the 8, 9, 10 inch range down in that area. I think that's I'm honestly believing that at least in this area, north of, you're going to have to go north of 76 to get into the 6 inch plus amounts, but they're going to tail off fairly rapidly as you get down toward the Maryland border. So I'm thinking this corner gets 1 to 4 inches in the first thumping that goes by, and that's it. And then that's the big question really for New York City, Long Island, and areas closer to the coast. There's going to be a thump of snow at the beginning. How much happens, I don't know. And then, of course, if you ever really want to avoid, and you will agree with me that there's a very simple way to avoid a rain-snow line, virtually avoid it, not always, but almost all the time, move to Maine.
That's true.
Move to central or northern New Hampshire.
That's true.
In fact, it probably would be the case that you would look forward to a change over to rain in those states, because it doesn't really happen very often.
I once saw a weird weather pattern, a massive storm. I think it was like south and east of Nova Scotia that wound up so much that they actually had, get this now, in Maine, they had a backdoor warm front.
Oh, there was the famous. What year was that we had? It was called the upside down storm.
Yeah.
Was that 2011?
I'm thinking about that. Yeah.
Was it 2011? The famous upside down storm where it was raining in Maine and it was in the teens down in Virginia.
Right.
With the snow and ice. Here's a question for you. Joseph Mayano asks, how far north do you think the mix line makes it up the Hudson Valley?
I think that once you go to 287, which I always like to use as a boundary line, 287 on south, I think a change to sleet and just plain rain. 287 north up to about the 84 corridor, I could see that the snow at times will mix with some sleet and ice, especially after 1 or 2 in the morning. But if you go north of 84, I think that's where it's going to be mainly snow, and I don't think we're going to see much mixing beyond 84. But even some of the models, Joe, that I've looked at in the last few hours, trying to push that line even up into parts of Dutchess County. So it's very tough. You know, I had a professor at City College. I think he was gone by the time you would arrive there a few years later. Professor Richard Romer, who I'm sure
I remember.
Professor Romer.
I remember.
And he once said trying to forecast snow or snow amounts in the New York metropolitan area is sometimes equivalent to playing pool with egg-shaped balls.
Yes.
And indeed, this is one of those weekends where the balls just simply are not going into the right cup. It looks like there could be some cases where it makes that sudden curve away from your original thought. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens tomorrow night.
Now this is, by the way, I'm seeing that a lot of you are asking questions with regards to the long range, and I'll just
aren't you people? I don't believe this. We're not even into this system yet.
I know.
I can't believe this.
Look, I'm just gonna tell you all as a group right now.
Cranky weather guy, tonight it's my turn to get cranky. Oh, God.
I'll just tell you as a group, we will talk about the long range. It's a very interesting pattern in the long range, but we'll get to it. So this was my forecast, Joe. This was my final call. I usually make an early call.
Yes.
I am not a fan of changing snow maps every 6 hours every time the model runs. Once you have an idea of what you're dealing with,
right?
You have an initial impression, and I kind of go with that. That's my early call, and then I wait for things to play out. And when we get to a comfortable time, when I feel sure, or inside 24 hours of the start time, whichever is later,
right?
I'll put up the final call. So I actually waited till this is late this afternoon because there's this was a very, very tough map to come up with because I'm not sure about the front side thump. Is there going to be a solid one, or is it going to, start and piddle around and then you maybe snow hard for about a half an hour or an hour and it just turns to sleet? And I'm talking here about the southern extent of this. Or is there going to be a solid area of heavy snow where it snows hard for 3 or 4 hours and you put down a quick 4, 5, or 6 inches? So I maybe went a bit conservative, where I have the 2-inch line cutting across the North Shore of Long Island, New York City, to just north of Trenton, and then between Reading and Philadelphia down into south central PA, south of Harrisburg to the Maryland line, and then I've got that 4-inch line from Harrisburg to just north of Reading to Allentown to White Plains, southern Connecticut, near Bridgeport, right. And then I've got a stripe of, it's very tight, 6 inches up in northern Orange County, northwest New Jersey, cutting through just north of, maybe along or just north of Route 84, and then another 8-inch stripe north of there, and then a 10-inch stripe north of there, a 12-inch stripe north of there. The funny thing is, Joe, that 1 foot line is where I put it earlier this week, and I left it there.
Okay.
I don't know. You certainly feel free to disagree.
No, I'm not going to disagree. It's so difficult to see exactly what's going to happen in terms of snow accumulations and amounts. And in fact, for example, on our map that we here at the FiOS 1 Weather Center have shown to our viewers, in a couple of cases where we have, for example, 6 to 12 inches, I've said on air, put more emphasis on the 6 as opposed to the 12, because there's a lot of inconsistency. There's a lot of changes from time to time, from one run to another, as to how warm, how cold it's going to be. We are looking for a sizable event. Now, the one thing that people say, well, how did you get that time frame for the peak of the storm, 10 o'clock in the evening to 4 in the morning on Sunday? And and it's not on Tropical Tidbits, but it's on the NCEP suite of model runs for the GFS. Is a parameter that they use called the omega parameter, which I'm assuming is some form of atmospheric energy. They show up as concentric circles of negative magnitude. And when you see, like in the summertime, a -10 or a -15, usually it's elongated coming through. That seems to indicate maybe a squall line of thunderstorms or whatever. And in the wintertime, we sometimes get higher amounts. There's going to be a omega max passing overhead, light over the tri-state area around 1 a.m. tomorrow night. with minus 22. You don't often see that for an omega value, and whenever you do see that, sometimes you get enough of a energy push to even get lightning and thunder. We saw that happen a couple of times last year.
Yeah.
So I think it's worthwhile to mention that from 10 o'clock to 4 a.m. Sunday morning, 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., there is a chance that not only will we see a thump, and not only will we see precipitation come down at a rather furious pace as that omega area passes overhead, but we may see flashes of lightning. We may get reports of a few peals of thunder. I don't know if any other forecasters have suggested that, but that also means that the precipitation could be convective in nature, and in some places, Joe, we could hear about snow amounts or snowfalls where it stays snow and doesn't change over, of greater than 2 inches per hour.
Wouldn't be surprised. Philip P., thanks for hitting Super Chat, and I'm sorry, but I don't think you're going to get a note to take off work Sunday morning. You're in South Amboy, New Jersey, in Middlesex County. You'll get a slushy couple, but then I honestly think it's going to go to rain. The storm, by the way, Joe, origin-wise, I pulled up the snow totals in the last 72 hours out in the west when it came inland. And by the way, it's been snowing. They really need to have 5-day totals here. They only go up to 36 inches, but there's missing about 2 days of data. So you've got spots out here in the Sierra Nevadas that got absolutely hammered with snow on the order of 70 and 80 inches.
I do hope the skiers are happy about that.
And, well, look, a ton of snow here up through the Rockies. This has been quite the powerhouse with respect to snowfall. And this doesn't include, by the way, the snow that's fallen today during the day today. Amounts are these amounts that you see here through South Dakota. They're going to certainly increase. And then we had our little, cheap thrill coating to an inch last night with this lead system that moved on through, and a small little pocket there in South Central PA that wound up with some 2-inch amounts, and that was it. Here's a fast question for you from Flying Rock. Do you think wet bulbing will do anything to lower temperatures?
No, not much.
Not the way, not in the air mass will. I don't know that it's going to be that dry tomorrow to begin with.
Yeah. Well, in fact, even right now, I don't know if you noticed. I was looking at some of the weather observations. There's actually mist being reported at White Plains, which kind of surprised me because I would have thought that by now everything would have dried out and we would have had a nice clear night. I have to check I should have checked the R1 level of the NAM-FUS, because when the levels are above 80%, even though the mid and high levels suggest clear sky, you have that low level that's saturated above 80% relative humidity.
Actually, when we roll on the models, which we'll do in a second, we'll bring that up. Here's the surface map, and there's your low sitting in western Oklahoma, 999 low there. You see all the isobars and the wind issues that are occurring. All those. The high wind watches and warnings that are up.
You think they drew enough fronts there?
Yeah, I know. I love how they analyze this stuff. Yeah, it does occasionally look like a pinwheel of cold fronts. Yeah. You have your cold air, by the way, Joe. Here's this high. You got temperatures well below zero across the northern plains, and part of this is going to push into the east and drain down southward through New York State and into Pennsylvania and down into Maryland. But it's not, earlier this week it looked like that cold wedge would build down stronger. Right. But as we've gone through the week, it's been less and less and less, and it's enough for areas just north and west of the coastal plain, but not enough for the coast itself.
Did you want me to say something?
No, go ahead. Say something.
No, I understand what you're saying, and I've seen cases where the high, indeed, it can be centered, north of Minnesota near Winnipeg or north of Lake Superior, but it kind of stretches out, sticks an arm out, so to speak, or ridges out over the northeastern states into New England. In fact, if some of you may remember back in 1978, the first of the two big northeast snowstorms that we had, the January 20th storm, we had just that. We had a kind of an arm of cold air that stretched across the northeast as the storm was coming up from the south. And the original forecast were that, well, the cold air, you may need some snow for cold air. It's going to stay pretty much just to our north. We'll start to snow and go to rain. And guess what? Instead, the cold air kind of drained southward, kept it cold enough for snow, and we had a surprise 2-foot snowfall in the tri-state area.
Radar at the moment starting to rev up a bit. You have snow there through Iowa, southern Minnesota, and into southern Wisconsin. Also precip that goes back across Kansas, and then you get into some more snow into Colorado. Not a whole lot in terms of rain shower activity at the moment, but actually the Storm Prediction Center does have a severe weather risk. So Joe, let's jump to the models tonight. Let's jump to the late afternoon GFS that you talked about, and we'll bring it up close. And there's your low. One of the things that right off the bat, that for snow lovers, when you look at a system on the surface map, look where the isobars are. A good sign is to look where this thing wants to go is where the isobars are showing the biggest bulge out to usually to the northeast or to the east-northeast or to the east. In this case, the isobars are actually bulging into West Virginia and southwestern Pennsylvania. That's telling me that surface low wants to go there. Mm-hmm. And that is what the GFS kind of does. I mean, it takes that low into northern West Virginia. This is, by the way, this is at 7 o'clock tomorrow evening. And another thing, at least as far as the coastal areas for New Jersey, Long Island, coastal New Jersey, southernmost Connecticut, another thing that's always bothersome to me is when you see the arc of snow when it initially breaks out, going north and west of New York City, as opposed to seeing that snow in northeastern Virginia, in Maryland, when it's coming up from that direction.
Sideways.
Yeah, and when it does this, that's usually a sign that that's a good indicator that the low track is going to be just inland of the coast and not offshore.
Right.
And indeed, you get this kind of 6-hour period there up until about midnight, and here the GFS actually already has it raining through Long Island and everywhere except northernmost New Jersey. Look where the low winds up. I mean, it's in northern West Virginia, and then it actually is near Philadelphia,
right,
according to the GFS. And as you said, if this is right, there's going to be a warm front that's going to push through Sunday morning into southern Connecticut, so that temperatures on Long Island and in central and South Jersey, particularly along the coast, could get into the 50s.
Could soar into the 50s.
Very briefly. And your big snows are upstate. In fact, you've got sleet up to about I-90 and sleet into the Catskills and Poconos with this, if the GFS is correct.
And we really won't, you start looking, let's say, later tomorrow and tomorrow evening as to where, let's say, the places that started out as snow suddenly have gone over quickly to sleet or even rain, like down the Jersey Shore, and that gives you a clue that we may be in trouble. We may be in trouble if you want snow or even freezing precipitation. And I know it'll be a little embarrassing, Joe, if I've heard so many of the news outlets in the tri-state area over the last couple of days that even though we've been saying sleet or ice or freezing rain or possibly rain, what do they all headline? Snow, 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 snow. And if it does change over to sleet or even plain rain in many areas, what are you going to hear on Sunday? Well, they said we were going to have a big snowstorm. No one said anything about sleet or ice or rain. It's always, and then the blame game is always on us.
Well, there's a whole philosophical conversation that I can get into one night. Maybe we'll save it for a night when the weather is slow.
Is less.
But with a low like this, Joe,
I'll tell you
the
what,
big snows are, for the interior, this is easy. If you're up in central and northwestern PA, if you're up in upstate New York, if you're up in central and northern New England, you can just sit back and count the inches. But down southern areas, I mean, if this track is right, the low moves pretty much right over Long Island Sound.
Now you see that, but this is, again, I've never been a fan of the intermediate runs, the 6Z and the 18Z runs. I always like the primary runs, the 0 and the 12. So when we get to the 0Z tonight, if the GFS at 0Z run tonight is doing what this is doing right now,
Right.
I think you're going to see a lot of forecasters.
Well, here's the 12. I mean, the 12 kind of does the same thing. It was maybe a bit further south.
Right.
With the low there near Trenton, New Jersey.
Right.
Looks like it moves, and then goes to Boston. I mean, that's still an inland track.
Right. If it's more of a westward track on the 0Z run tonight, I guarantee you, folks, you will see a lot of your local radio and television forecasters tomorrow morning talk about, well, we're going to lower the accumulations because we think there's going to be a bit more sleet or rain mixing in as opposed to being all snow and summer. You'll see that happen if that be the case.
James Hines makes a very good point. There's this been ongoing argument. Well, let's not call it an argument. There's an ongoing discussion about the fact that there are problems with the GFS. Apparently, there's some data problems, and whether they were able to address them or not with the government shutdown. The model has a warm bias. The model does definitely have a warm bias.
Oh, yeah.
Case in point, the last couple of days for today, forecasting temperatures up in the low and mid 40s for our area, and just about everybody didn't get out of the 30s. So, there's been a definite 5 to 7 degree bias in the model to begin with. But I think James's point is well taken, because when the European is doing the same thing, it's kind of where the European doesn't really have a warm bias that we know of.
Right.
And here's the European, which has the low virtually in the same spot as the GFS and takes it pretty much in the same place. It's really kind of hard to argue that the GFS has no value with what it's doing, because the European's doing the same. And you know what? The Canadian's doing the same thing as well. All three of the global models are doing this. By the way, not to neglect the folks across the Midwest, you can see there is a band of heavy snow that passes through in through Illinois and in through central Illinois and in through central Indiana. So you guys are going to get a fair amount of snow here. You're not going to get the big amounts, but the big amounts are going to occur as the system goes to the east. Now, the one model that doesn't have a warm, can't be accused of having a warm, that you can't accuse of having a warm bias, is the NAM for the last several runs. Right. And I think this is probably a good opportunity for us to go pretty close.
But even the NAM now is starting to show a bit more in the way of rain, liquid precipitation, than it did, let's say, over the last few runs. It seems to also try to push a bit more of that warmer air in. I noticed, for example, on the Foos today, Joe, that the T1 boundary layer temperature was at or just above 0 degrees at LaGuardia, whereas, let's say, a day or two ago, the NAM was saying the boundary temperature T1 was like -1, -2.
Right.
So as much as that's not, you sometimes say, well, what's the big deal, a degree or two? Well, that is a big deal when the critical temperature is 0 and you're messing around with a degree or two, below or above. That's going to be a critical, thing in factoring for whether or not, let's say, New York City or some coastal areas get snow versus just plain rain.
And, there are arguments that you could make about the NAM, as some of you were making on the board, about the NAM handling cold air better, and it does. It usually does. But, when you look at the signature of what's going on at the surface, when you look at what's going on aloft, it's kind of hard to fight the idea that maybe the NAM this time is the one that's too cold. Mm-hmm. At 4 a.m. on Sunday, it is it's raining on Long Island, much of Jersey south of 78. The main concern, to me, what the main concern has been for the areas from southern Pennsylvania northeastward through central and North Jersey, Long Island, New York City, southern areas of the Hudson Valley, southern areas of Connecticut, has been the possibility that the 32-degree line was only going to get to New York City or barely just north of New York City for a couple of hours.
Right.
And I didn't think that the snow was going to be the big issue because of the fact that the idea of the whole system being so far south in terms of the surface low and the offshore track that somehow that 0 degree temperature at 4,700 feet at 850 millibars, which is a good indicator of where the range snow line is, that zero was going to collapse from just north of Poughkeepsie all the way down south of New York City. So I didn't think snow was really the huge issue. But, you know, you look at this, you know, the NAM still holds on to the possibility that there could be some significant icing just barely north and west of the coast.
Now, is that fuchsia color? I've always had this problem using Levi Cohen's
right, because I can't the color scheme with freezing rain and sleet look almost the same.
Is that sleet or is that freezing rain?
I think that I think it's both. I think some of it, like the brighter red to me on the southern end of that, looks like that might be freezing rain, while the purple area that's up on the northern half of it, I think that's sleet. You can see the colors are tough.
Right.
But you can only have so many colors in the spectrum today.
I understand, but there's a big difference between freezing rain and sleet. Freezing rain, of course, important because if we get freezing rain accumulating on power lines and trees, that means power outages. If it's sleet, all right, so you got these little balls of ice that are going to hit the tree and bounce off and bounce on the ground or something like that, and that may not cause quite a bit of a problem. So I just
I'm looking at the scale. So the lightest purples, the lightest purples are the top part of there. To me, that looks like that's sleet, and then the bottom end of it looks like it might be more freezing rain. I guess maybe if you think, when you think about it, with where the low is, that southern end might very well be freezing rain because of how warm some of the low levels are starting to get, just to the south across Long Island. And by the way, where it is rain, you have to think that, as you said, the chance for maybe a thunderstorm, and some of that rain I think is probably going to be heavy during the overnight, Saturday night into Sunday morning.
I always look during winter storms to see what the omega situation is. Again, I'm not even sure exactly what omega is, and it's not really something that's found on many of the models. In fact, I think I'm going to email Levi at Tropical Tidbits and ask him if he can put it into Tropical Tidbits, because you have to go to a completely different site to look at it. But when I see those concentric circles indicating omega, again, they're in magnitudes of descending numerical order, like -5, -10, and -22. You don't see very often. That is going to go right over us 1 o'clock tomorrow night. And whenever I've seen that, I always say there's going to be some convection, and we usually do see convection. So a peal or two of thunder or a flash of lightning, people might be, going to bed at like 1 or 2 in the morning after watching Saturday Night Live, and all of a sudden the bedroom lights up and the big crack of thunder, and what the heck was that?
Steve Lapointe is mad at me because he seems to think that you've talked me out of my liking the NAM. That is so untrue. Joe and I are actually both huge. I like to use the NAM, and Joe likes to use the NAM too. We both understand have used the model for so long.
I was converted, but I was actually one of the people who was ballyhooing get rid of the NAM. I didn't really like the NAM because and it's been around for a very long time now. And then came that storm, the 2016 storm.
The January 20.
Now you talk about
2016.
Now you're talking about making a case for the Canadian, the European, and the GFS. That storm, they were all in the same camp, saying that we were going to get maybe 4 to 8 or 5 to 10 inches of snow. And in came the NAM with New York City getting possibly as much as 30 inches of snow. And I said, "Are you crazy? Are you nuts? Why are we still looking at this model?" Guess what? New York City had something close to 30 inches.
Well, it's always my view. I have my way of looking at models, and I don't look at every single one of them all the time because it's gotten to the point that by the time I got through looking at all the models, I have to start 10 days out, and the event would pass me by. So I have ones that I look at that I understand and work. They work very well for me. That I go to, and the NAM being one of those models. But I'm also a proponent of trying to figure out and practice the fact that when sometimes when I can figure out what model has the hot hand, that's the one I'll try to lead on.
Well, the NAM has had the hot hand more often than not.
Yeah, the last winter it certainly did, and we haven't had enough winter weather systems here in the east to know whether it still has the hot hand. Well, look at it this way. If we wind up with a prolonged period of sleet and freezing rain just north and west of New York City, which the other models would suggest probably might not be the case, then the NAM will continue to have more of a hot hand than the other models. Certainly if it doesn't show the kind of warming that the GFS does.
And this is kind of a situation where many weeks or months from now, in BAMS, the Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society, which the both of us are members, you'll see a case study. You might see a case study of the NAM, the North American model, versus the GFS and all the other models, and cite this particular situation, this particular setup.
So, Joe, I thought I'd bring up the temperature, the issue of the 32-degree, where the freezing line is going to be.
Right.
So the blue line, as you see where the red lines and the blue lines meet, there's a very narrow dashed purple line. That is where the freezing line is going to be. And we're at 7 o'clock tomorrow evening. And if you watch what the NAM does with it, it just basically straddles it near New York City, kind of jumps it up. By 4 a.m. it's at about White Plains, and that's as far north as it gets. And then it collapses so that by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it's offshore, and actually the 20-degree isotherm is dropping southward through the Hudson Valley, getting ready to approach White Plains.
Look how the isobars are like nosing down the Hudson Valley.
Yes, that kind of V-shape right along the New York state line. That's this air is coming from a place. This is normally when we get the cold air masses, they come in from the northwest, or from the northwest, and we have either a west wind or a west northwest wind, maybe sometimes a northwest wind, but we don't often get it where we're getting a due north wind, and that wind is cold, and that's what we're going to have here Sunday night into Monday morning. So as a result, the zero at 7 a.m. drops to just north of New York City. The 5-degree isotherm down along the Pennsylvania-Maryland border into parts of southwest Jersey, across Long Island. The -5, Joe, up into just touching northwest New Jersey, and it looks like just north of Poughkeepsie. I mean, this is really brutally cold air that's coming in, and it's going to do it on strong winds during Sunday night into Monday morning. So we're going to have some pretty awful wind chills.
Right. Now, we've been hearing a talk about flash freeze and the sudden precipitous drop of the temperature, and I know now in a lot of people's minds, when the precipitation ends on Sunday, sometime around late morning or midday, I think a lot of people are expecting the temperatures to do that. However, over the last couple of days, I've maintained that in the upper levels of the atmosphere, we're going to have to wait until the trough actually pivots around and lines up with the surface winds out of the north direction. So even though we might be getting a northerly wind Sunday afternoon and even Sunday evening, the upper level winds are still coming probably from the southwest. I know it sounds confusing, but when that trough line moves through, and this is probably going to happen after midnight Sunday night, that's when the bottom is really going to fall out of the thermometer, and the temperature is going to take that fast plunge down to, as Joe just mentioned, close to zero. So I really don't, the wind is going to certainly make it uncomfortable. The chill factor, the feels-like temperature on Sunday afternoon and early evening, but I'm not expecting the temperature to get horribly cold. I think the temperatures even Sunday afternoon will be somewhere in the 20s, and I think Sunday evening they'll still probably be in the teens. But once we get past midnight, boom, down we go quickly into the single digits, and that's where you're going to get your, I don't know if you want to call it a flash freeze by then, because we'll already be many hours below freezing, but still, that's where we're going to be getting our coldest air. And I also think that temperatures on Monday, you've probably been hearing possibly 10 or 15 degrees or something like that. I wouldn't be at all surprised, Joe, even with bright sunshine, if at least in the Hudson Valley, temperatures on Monday don't even get above 10.
Well, here's the shaded version of the map, by the way, instead of the contrast, so you can see with the colors. This is at 7 a.m. Monday morning. I mean, you're talking single digit lows back into the Great Lakes, below zero lows across much of northeastern Pennsylvania, and -10, -15 lows west of the Hudson as you go up to the north on the up into the Adirondacks, you got some -13, -15 numbers there up through Vermont and New Hampshire, and all of that air. With that north wind, you can see what the low temperatures are in southeastern Canada. That is brutally cold. And then the highs, yeah, Joe, you look at the 18Z. This is at 18Z, so 1 o'clock in the afternoon. You still got mostly single-digit temperatures in northern New Jersey, and at 21Z, that's which is 4 o'clock, so probably just past the normal time of the high of the day.
Right.
Yeah, where you just inland of north and west of the coast, we're talking. You're right. I don't think it's going to get out of the single digits, and it may not get much above 11 or 12 in New York City and Point South, and that's a rare event.
Very reminiscent of Christmas 1980. We were talking about this yesterday, where even with bright sunshine, the temperature at Central Park struggled just to get out of the single digits that afternoon. The temperatures plunged in the after midnight and early morning hours of Christmas morning 1980, and it's been a long time coming. You know, as you just said, Joe, you don't often see a scenario like this, but I think very much this is going to be that type of scenario come Sunday night late into Monday.
All right, so why don't we go at this point? You know what? Let me pull up the positive snow growth map, for which it is very positive that snow will grow. Now, you know, look here. This is the NAM. This is positive snow growth. So basically, this is supposed to take into account what is sleet, what is freezing rain, and subtract it out of the numbers. So if that's the case, you're going to have to go pretty far into. It does have a stripe of 3-inch snows from southeast and south central PA across New
looks
Jersey.
like right along 78, doesn't it?
Well, north and west of 78 looks like to me. Yeah, I guess that's like 4+ up there.
Yeah.
But you know, it's got that stripe of light blue, which would be 2 to 3 inches, just along and just northwest of the Turnpike, across New York City, southern Connecticut, and you know, maybe southern areas of the Hudson Valley. To me, you know, I don't know. I'm not good at. I have a tough enough time just trying to pick out what the bottom amount is. You know, if you're trying to figure out what the top amounts, who knows what the highest snow totals are going to be in any spot. You know, this thing's got 2 foot plus amounts up there near Albany, and up through New Hampshire, Vermont, and into Maine.
Well, I think that Albany forecast is an easy one. Whether you use the GFS or the NAM, they're going to get clobbered this time around.
Oh, either way. I mean, even if you were wind up to get even mixing to get all the way up there for an hour or two,
right.
It's not going to really matter in terms of the snow totals. But yeah, you can see where the cutoff is though from nothing to a coating, which is the darkest blue.
Mm-hmm.
It's just to the south of here. It's a very, very sharp cutoff, and this is on the colder model.
Right.
Okay. So if we go to the GFS, it's again similar idea of where that southern cutoff is, but the amounts on the southern flank are a bit less.
Right.
You have to go north of 84 to start finding a 5 and 6 inch amounts.
Right.
So.
And isn't it amazing, Joe? It's a flip flop of last weekend. The people who got bombed with snow last weekend are sitting now complacently and looking up and saying, you know, all you people who are laughing at us, who's got the last laugh now?
Well, and this is a very good, example and a very good reason why, you know, I've said this to a number of young forecasters and folks, you know, kids that are learning. You can't use these snow maps as a forecast tool. I think they're useful. The individual print numbers are meaningless to me, but sometimes the map will kind of match up to where you think the snow area might be, where you think the heavier snow area might be. That is probably the better way to use the map, and you certainly should not be looking at a point where a number is printed and say, okay, it's got 5 for Poughkeepsie, so I'm going to forecast 5. Okay. That would not be the approach. And since rain is going to be an issue, because I know Johnny Quest, I'm sorry, I did mean to get to this, because I know you asked about the state of your growing Great Lake there in northwest along the Blue Ridge Mountains with all the rain you've had. But your rainfall amounts, your liquid rainfall amounts, look to be on the order of an inch to an inch and a half, maybe, perhaps a shade higher than that. This is, by the way, through Monday morning. So this encompasses the whole event. Now, quick look at the long range. Do you feel
Sure.
inspired?
Sure, why not?
All right. So we've been saying that, and you have made this point several times. The fact that at some point, with this pattern shaping up, that we're with the flow coming down from Canada in a really, really strong way after this polar vortex split, that at some point there's going to be one big Arctic dump. We're going to get a taste of that Monday into Tuesday, but at the long range today, and it's been kind of telegraphing the idea that you're going to see this vortex just basically, drop southward, and the GFS obliges us today, Joe. We've got blocking developing up in Greenland. You've got a big ridge up in the west, in the Pacific, moving up over Alaska, and the vortex just gets forced all the way south. I mean, look at this, and this is the GFS 10-day. So it's not this day 16. This is day 10, which is next weekend, the 26th, 27th, and Monday the 28th.
Look at that big blocking ridge over Baffin Island in northern Canada.
this is really insane. Now, I think maybe the actual orientation of this is going to change somewhat, and I also believe that. I think there's going to be an opportunity in here for some snow of size if this winds up happening. Literally the way it looks with the block up there like that and the upper low dropping southward. The one thing that argues against that, however, and this is something that was one of the possibilities we talked about. Remember, what do I always say about pattern change, Joe? The pattern change you want and the pattern change you get may not necessarily be the same thing. And in this instance, it looks like we have this bowling ball sitting, what I call the broad bowl, sitting in the eastern part of the United States. It's going to be very hard to get a lot of precip in a pattern like this, that we could wind up going bitterly cold and bitterly dry for a period of time.
And that's why, in a great segue, the Climate Prediction Center, as I've been noting, every Friday after 4 o'clock, if you go to the Climate Prediction website, you can see that they have, in addition to the 6 to 10 day and 8 to 14 day outlooks they have in the last year or two, been experimenting with a 3 to 4 week probability for temperature and precipitation, and the 3 to 4 week map today, which encompasses really the first half of February, shows that in our part of the country, the eastern half of the country, it will be unseasonably cold, and that certainly times out with what you were saying, Joe. And
here, I'll put up the temperature anomaly.
And also,
I mean, look at that. Look at that huge area of below average temperatures.
How unseasonably cold is that, folks?
Look at this.
Look at that.
And it goes all the way down to Florida. That vortex dropping south means that cold air is going to make it pretty far south.
Right.
In fact, just for laughs, I want to see if I can. I'm not going to be able to see it on this map. And this is not a forecast. We're just kind of having fun here in a way, just to see. These are the actual 2-meter temperatures. So where you see the line there down across Florida, so there's your freezing line. Let me just run that back. But you can see the bitter cold air coming into the Great Lakes and Plains. Some of that gets in here into the east, and that freezing line gets down almost into through central Florida and down through all of the Gulf states. So this is a really, in fact, you have single-digit temperatures there down into Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. So this is really cold air that is setting up. And by the way, Joe, before we even get to that, I want to just back up, because in the process of getting to that, there will be, I think, an attempt for something here. We've got a front coming through on Wednesday. There's a wave that's going to develop on that front. The GFS has it very flat. The Canadian and European have a deep low coming out of the Gulf states and running up well to our west because the trough position is going to be to the west. And then there's a diver that comes into the east as we head into next weekend. Maybe you might get something like this, but you're going to have the right upper air.
What is that? A 1056
or 9? I think it's a 9.
1059.
Oh, it's a 1060 high there.
1060.
It solved the problem of us not being able to see it. I mean, look at how cold this is.
Yeah.
You've 474 thickness. You don't see 474 thicknesses even up in the cold spots in the U.S. very often. And that 480 thickness down to Chicago, I mean, this is brutal air that comes down into the southeastern part of the United States.
I'm not out of modesty. I hate to say modesty or whatever, but I did say that I felt that by the end, as we move toward the end of January or the beginning of February, we were going to see a big dump somewhere, and if that's not a big dump, I don't know what is. Of cold air, I'm talking about, folks. And by the way, Joe, that outlook taking into account from CPC, the Climate Prediction Center, not only unseasonably cold, but also unusually dry for not just our part of the country, but for much of the country. But of course, if you've got a situation like this, that huge high, how are you going to manage to get any significant storm or moisture out of something like that?
And don't bet against, by the way, for the folks that are in our area, that this all happens without any snow cover on the ground, because the way things have been going, it's certainly quite possible you can get all this bitter cold air. You'll have Arctic tundra conditions without actually it would be. There's not a whole lot of snow up there.
But if there's a good point to this, and here's the good point. I live in a wooded area up in Putnam County, and I have a dog, and you always are concerned about ticks and Lyme disease. And you figure that, in the wintertime, the cold air, the cold weather and the snow is going to kill off the ticks. No, not necessarily. When there's snow, especially deep snow cover, the ticks use that to their advantage. They use that as kind of like an insulator. And so when it gets cold, if there's a decent amount of snow, they'll use that to stay warm and also to stay alive. But when there's a situation where it's just cold and there's no snow, goodbye ticks. And this is not the kind of weather that the ticks would like to see. And if indeed we get into February, we get that kind of weather without any significant snow cover, this could mean a lower tick population perhaps for this spring and summer, which is good news.
Oh, no question. And a few people have brought up the tick issue, and you're right. You get one solid freeze with no snow cover. That should get rid of them once and for all. Let me just really quick, Joe, just mention that with this storm moving eastward, the Storm Prediction Center actually does have a marginal risk of severe weather tonight for northeastern Texas, northern Louisiana, and through Arkansas and southeastern Oklahoma, western Mississippi. If you're watching this on a replay, I mean, we're coming up on 8 o'clock Eastern time, so if you're watching this later on a replay, be sure to check your local National Weather Service office for the latest on any severe weather watches and warnings, and you can do that by just going to weather.gov and clicking on your geographic area. The other thing I want to bring up WPC's 7-day rainfall map, which I'm really a fan of. And you notice it's got a ton of precip here across Mississippi, southern Kentucky, through Alabama, and in through northeast Georgia. And of course, it's got a ton of precip here. Not all of this is from the system right now. So I think WPC is probably looking at the models and thinking that later this week and going into next weekend that we may have something in play with another system coming out, and indeed that is the case. And I'm going to show the European in a second. But also I want to just point out, at least up for the Northern California and on northward, a lot of rain. But Central and Southern California, which has been hit particularly hard in the last week or so, looks like you're going to be catching a break now as everything starts to shift to the northwest. So let me just bring the maps back again. And where did it go? Where'd my window go? I'm always misplacing my window. Oh, there it is.
Are they Anderson?
Yes, what Father knows best.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's show you the European, and we can't show that the European doesn't have a preset map that's available for free. So we're going to use the anomaly map, and let me switch it over here to the European model. So the European is a very active pattern on the European going forward. This is your storm for Sunday, for Saturday night, Sunday, in almost the same position as the GFS and the Canadian, and not in the spot where the NAM has it, and also not where these models had it earlier this week, where they were piddling around with putting lows out in the ocean and having colder solutions.
Near the benchmark.
Right, which is not going to happen. That moves out. And then you've got the next system. Now here's that cold high goes out. We warm up Wednesday. A front goes by, and on Thursday there's a low near Biloxi, Mississippi, and it rides up and winds up just north of northern New Hampshire and Vermont. So this looks like, Joe, it takes, like, you have a primary that probably goes up into eastern Ohio or western Pennsylvania, and then. That maybe might be snow at the start to, well, it depends, but
there's no cold blocking.
There's no cold high here. That goes out, and you can already see the next system dropping down into the plains and drops down into the Gulf of Mexico, and this one on the European winds up going up the Appalachians and becoming a big storm once it gets north of Lake Huron. It's got a 974, and this is the European, by the way, telegraphing that big Arctic dump, very much like the GFS is. Both models have this, really kind of extreme cold look, and you got that blocking signature again across the top, so you can watch how it comes out on the European. The problem for snow in the east here, folks, is the fact that the trough position is at 90 west. It's too far west.
You can't have it over there.
And you can't have it over there. Even 85 would be better, even though 85 is not where you want it. You want it near closer to 80. It's at 90. That's not good. That's snow to, at best, that's snow to rain. Right. And once you get through whatever happens late next week, then you've got this big, this Arctic high, and I'll match it up. It's not too often that they're close, but they're almost the same here.
Right. They have the same
at the same time frame. They both have the same idea. That actually doesn't happen too often. In the long range.
Does the Canadian have something like that too, or is it sometimes the Canadian is on its own?
On its own. Well, it doesn't have the big vortex coming down. It still has that kind of broad bowl, and it's cold.
Yeah.
But it's nothing like the other two models. Right. Well, the Canadian model usually, it takes a while for it to kind of catch on. Yeah. Every once in a while, the Canadian model hits a home run or two, and then. Then it kind of sits around and then starts doing.
Rests on its laurels.
As one of the folks on the board said, I'm sorry, I'm not sure who it was. It said that either that or it does these sort of apocalyptic scenarios on a regular basis, where during hurricane season it spins up 10 hurricanes in a row, and virtually all of them, will wind up being fiction.
The one storm that I think the Canadian outdid all the other models. And I can only think of a handful over the last 20 or 25 years. But the President's Day storm of 2003, they really had a great handle on that.
I think it also did well with the Boxing Day blizzard.
In 2010?
I seem to recall that the Canadian may have done pretty well with that. Yeah. They all have moments. They all are. Have their time in the sun, where they have a hot hand and then they go cold. Sometimes they all have issues, and then there are those moments where one of them just is like spot on for weeks and weeks at a time. And right now, and it's been a while since we've seen something like that. There's been a lot of just basic volatility with all of this, and with the state of the atmosphere, with all these extreme things happening with respect to what happened in the stratosphere, the splitting of the polar vortex, and everything else. This is another one of those instances where, if we had the teleconnections and could look at them in terms of the number values, Joe, they would be off the charts,
right.
or going off the charts with the NAO and the North Atlantic Oscillation, the East Pacific Oscillation, and the Pacific North America Index. You would probably see them all kind of stretched out in extreme positions, and and it's been my experience that anytime you see that, the weather models seem to have a very difficult time, especially in the longer range, but even in the short range, they do have a tough time.
They play catch up, you know.
Exactly.
It's really difficult for them to, you know, take everything on. And remember, folks, these are supercomputers. I mean, they do they have algorithms and they work on, you know, millions of calculations over a very short interval of time. And if they have problems, you can just imagine how you and I would try to.
Reaver has a question. I don't know the answer to this over the top of my head. Maybe you might have a general answer for this. But if the 850 temperature is minus 40, what would you think the temperature would be at the surface?
Oh God. Well, first of all, minus 40 is the same Celsius and Fahrenheit.
Right.
And we're talking
Correct.
about 4,000. Well, if it's a dry adiabatic, right?
Right.
Is it 3.5 degrees per 1,000 feet? And so we're talking about 4,000 or 4,800 feet. Let's round that off to 5,000. So it's 3.5 degrees. 3.5 times 5 would be what? 15, or let's say 20.
Okay.
So how does this sound? 60 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. Does that sound?
It might work for might work for me.
You know,
Nitrovert, who has snow on the ground in Minnesota, wants to know, with the Arctic air coming down, you know, how cold would you see it? Well, you know, minus 20, minus 30. Who knows? I mean, you have to just kind of wait to see what actually comes down. But could you see some really ridiculous extreme numbers? Yes. And then I want to see it warm up so quickly that when precip arrives, you never see a flake or an ice pellet, and it winds up raining.
Yeah, because feel like living out in the Rockies with a Chinook, you know?
Yeah.
The temperature just like that goes straight up.
All right.
So before we close,
which we got to do.
Before we close, for those of you who are wondering about the lunar eclipse on Sunday night, whereas a couple of days ago it looked kind of grim for seeing it because we didn't know whether or not the storm was going to move fast enough out of here, and now it does look like it's going to move fast enough. At least that's how it looks right now. So either at eclipse time it'll be clear or clearing in much of the tri-state New York area and points especially south and west. To the northeast up across New England, you may still be waiting for the clouds to break, and maybe they might not break in time. But the one thing about this event on Sunday night, as beautiful and as rare and as spectacular as it will be, if you plan to go out to look, you better bundle up, because we're looking at temperatures, Joe, in the teens and single digits, and chill factors far below 0. I was planning, I have this big telescope, a 10-inch Dobsonian telescope. I have to pull it out of my garage and wheel it out and put it out. But you know what? It's going to be so cold on Sunday night. I may just step outside with a pair of binoculars and watch, and then go back inside and come back out. It's unfortunate that it's going to be that way, but at least it looks like right now that for those of you who want to at least get a look at it, there is in this area at least a fairly good chance of seeing it.
Alfred Phillips from Wainwright, Alaska, who's on the north coast, is on tonight, and he said looks like early spring for Alaska. So I just was sort of thinking, okay, so then you're probably seeing temperatures rise up to 0, as we're seeing temperatures dropping down to 0.
Right.
So what is one man's winter is another man's spring.
Well, I remember during the frigid cold winter of 1977, the news media took great delight in making comparisons between the temperature in New York or Philadelphia, Chicago versus Anchorage and Fairbanks. And in that type of situation, they were underneath this tremendous ridge, and they were getting temperatures above freezing, and we were sitting, near 10 or 5 degrees. So that's the way. So I hope he's enjoying those balmy breezes up in Wainwright.
Mirtha Gunter, I think, was talking about the eclipse, said you should just, I guess, be inside and look out your window. But as you mentioned, you were talking to me yesterday about this. You almost can't really do that unless you've got a skylight.
Exactly. This is the highest, and when I say high, I'm talking about in terms of altitude in the sky, the highest total lunar eclipse for the tri-state area since the late 1700s, 1792, I think. The moon is going to be 70 degrees high in the sky. To get an idea of how high that is, make a fist. Hold it out as arm's length. That's 10 degrees. So we're talking about from the horizon, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 7 fists. The moon is going to be up there. Now, if you have a window that can reach all the way up there, that's great. Yeah. But this is not going to be one of those situations where you can just look at, oh, look at the moon. No, the moon's going to be up there.
Yeah, you're going to be up here.
Which pretty
it's going
much
to hurt your head.
Which pretty much is going to force all of you, or most of you, if you want to see it, you're going to have to step outside and brave the cold. I'm sorry to say.
All right, so we're gonna say goodbye at this point. So let me just say, just to let you guys know about a couple of things. On my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Chaffee, Joe and I will be doing our regular Joe and Joe weather show tonight at roughly 9:25 or 9:30. So we will live stream the NAM for once again, and if we have time, we should also have the 0Z HRRR model, which is another short range model, and that 0Z model sometimes goes out to 36 hours. So it'll be, it'll be useful because that'll take us through Saturday night to see its perspective.
Okay.
And excuse me. So that will be at roughly 9:25 Eastern time. I will then, for those of you who don't have Facebook, I will immediately upload it to YouTube, and you'll have it on there roughly at about 10:15. For those of you that are members of my weather platform on Patreon, I will do a private live stream tonight at 10:30. Just a quick one to kind of go over what the new model runs, the first of the new model runs are doing, and maybe take a quick peek of the new GFS. So I will send you guys the link to that in just a little bit. So just bear that in mind. And if you'd like to be a member of my Patreon weather platform, where you get this and live streams just for Patreon members, and lots of other posts, a little bit of weather school that I've been doing with the members. They actually have a challenge tonight to put out their own final call snow forecast map, and some of them have. So if you are interested in that, it's a subscription site, but it's a price of a cup of coffee here, folks. We're talking $2 a month. I'm cheaper than Starbucks. So I put the link up there on the chat board for you, so do consider it if you will. And I will be here tomorrow working my regular shift, so we'll be live streaming tomorrow, probably at about 7 o'clock Eastern time, weather permitting, and just watch for the schedule. I will put a schedule time up there as soon as I have that figured out on my YouTube channel, and you guys will get your notification. So see you hopefully at 9:25 on Facebook. If not, you'll get to see it afterward. Patreon guys, we'll see you at 9:25, and then we'll also see you at 10:30. Good night, everybody.
Nighty night.